to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta, and welcome to a new season. I'm here with Buffy. So, Buffy, tell us, how do you deal when the shit gets real? Or just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a crier, so yeah, there's that. But normally I don't have the time to cry. I'm raising kiddos by myself, so it's pull your big girl panties up and let the tears fall on the pillowcase. I'm 43 years old. I'm a single mom, raising two girls. My oldest daughter, she's had multiple brain surgeries. It started from day one. She was 6 days old when she had her first. We knew, upon gestation, that there were problems. So it was expected, but she's now 16, doing great.
I love that I'm starting the season. We ended last season and started this season with a crier. So, I guess we're just it's a good omen for the season.
Hey, it works. It works. But I have a son. He's 25. I've got a grandbaby that's 2.
You
And
can't
my
have a grandbaby. You're too young to have a grandbaby.
yes. Well, I had my son at 18. So that made him 23 when he had his first. So, he waited a little while longer. So that was good. But yeah, my youngest, that's my mini me. That's my penance for everything that I did to my mother. She likes to remind me daily.
Of course. I mean, teenager's job anyway, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't think I've heard you say that before. How did you know in gestation that there was going to be problems with your middle?
Went in for an ultrasound to find out the gender, and I knew something was wrong because the ultrasound tech, she was taking a really long time, and she left and came back, and I'm like, okay, that's not normal. Like, I've already been through one kid. I'm like, okay, this is not right. And she's like, the doctor needs to speak with you. So the doctor comes in and he's like, we don't see a brain. So on the ultrasound, the brain will show up as white. You'll see the brain matter. And when there's fluid, it shows up as black. So they could not see the brain because she had excessive fluid buildup. Um,
Wow.
yeah, she was born with hydrocephalus due to aqueductal stenosis, which essentially, aqueduct is a waterway. Stenosis is narrowing or closure. And where the cerebral spinal fluid washes the brain and goes into your spinal cord, it was completely blocked off. So all the fluid stayed on the top of her brain. So she had to have what's called a VP shunt at birth.
That is wild. So you gave birth to her and then immediately they had to do surgery?
She was 6 days old. They had to stabilize her.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah, we didn't know for about 2 weeks before we found out whether or not she had a brain, whether she was a viable, you know, fetus or not, because we had to get type 2 ultrasounds. I have enough really cool ultrasounds to fill an entire book. So there is, silver linings. We got to have, the really cool facial features one. Um, but yeah, she was transferred almost immediately to Children's, and I had to have her at a hospital that had a NICU so that she could go pretty much right away. So it was less than 12 hours she was transported.
That had to be so hard for you to give birth, be recovering from giving birth, and then your baby is taken away from you.
It was crazy. To be honest, I really don't remember a lot of it because it was just so hectic and just so much all at once. And I had a C-section. I had to on account of her condition. So it was just nuts. I'm trying to recover, and C-sections are not fun, but I had a day pass. I ended up actually only spending 2 nights at the hospital. He let me out early, but because of all the excessive walking, I ended up back in the office. I had her on Tuesday. I was in the office on Friday with a hematoma, so it was a
Oh
little rough.
no.
But yeah, she had really bad jaundice, so she had to be put under a bilirubin light. So we couldn't even hold her at all for 6 days, I believe, after her surgery. We got to hold her right before her surgery, and then after her surgery.
That had to be I can't even imagine, like, my son had high Billy Reuben as well. We just put him my mom had a sunroom, so we were able to just get it under control at home, but we would have had to do the same thing if we didn't do that. And that was hard enough, like, having to get his heels pricked and do all that, so I can't imagine having to not only let her go after surgery, but, like, I feel like once you got her back, like, holding her, I would have been really anxious to hold her, like, she's got this scar, I'm guessing, on the back of her head, like, it would make me very anxious. Did it make you anxious?
Incredibly so. She had a head full of hair, so they had to shave her hair. So I,
Oh,
I got a little baggie of her first haircut. Not the way I wanted it, but you
right.
take what you can get. But she
Nice that
was
they thought about it, though. I mean, that's something.
absolutely. I absolutely adored her neurosurgeon. When I actually met him for the first time, I was pregnant, and I felt like his bedside manner was just so odd. I was like, I don't even like this doctor because I go in there and he's like, "Well, do you know what you're here for?" And I'm thinking, "What, you don't?" So it was a little off putting at first, but he was absolutely amazing, compassionate, and empathetic to the situation. Incredibly great about explaining everything. He was quite elderly. So, with the bedside manner and then his age, I was like, I'm not really sure about this. But he ended up being her neurosurgeon for like 4 years. And
Oh,
he was,
that's awesome.
so she's had the whole team of neurosurgeons over at Children's, unfortunately. But her neurosurgeon now is the chief of staff.
Oh, well, how cool. So that wasn't her only surgery. So she got one at 6 days old, and then
She's had multiple. She had one in 2015. Her shunt actually disconnected. So basically, it's a tube that's inserted into the brain to redirect the fluid. And it's tunneled under her skin and it goes down her neck, across her chest, and into her stomach to reabsorb the fluid. When she had a growth spurt, the tubing had been there for so long, it fused to the bone behind the ear and her collarbone. She had a growth spurt and it snapped.
oh,
So they had to go in and replace that one. Oh, that was 2016. There's been so many, it's hard to keep track. 2015 was an actual, the ventricular catheter, which is the part that's in her brain. That one, it kind of slid up because her head had grown. So it was no longer positioned in the proper place. And then in 2018, she had a Chiari decompression surgery where they basically removed the whole back of her head.
oh
So
my God.
that was, we knew she had Chiari, but that's not something that you treat unless you actually have um, symptoms for it. So if you're asymptomatic and you're doing fine, you don't have to worry. But she started being very lethargic. She could barely hold her arms up. She was so tired all the time. She was not your normal kid. She barely spent a full day in school from like December till she had the surgery in April. So we
Just
had
couldn't handle it, didn't have the energy.
no energy whatsoever.
Poor
It was
thing.
so hard to go through. Now, most of her surgeries prior to the initial one was kind of easy to go through, if that makes any sense, because it was an emergency situation. So basically, it's like you go in and you don't have time to freak out because it's just happening like back to back. But with
That's what I
this
was
one,
gonna ask, because with, like, the growth spurt thing, I'm assuming, like, she all of a sudden had symptoms and you just took her in and they were like, "Oh my god, we have to fix this." Is that essentially what happened?
yeah. Yep. So, with those, it's just like, okay, we've got this, we got to deal with it. And before you have time to freak out, you're home. She literally spends a night in the hospital and she comes home on Tylenol. The only one that she really had trouble with is when they had to redo the tubing because they tunnel it under the skin. So that made it really sore. So she came home on different meds. But with any of the actual just shunt surgeries, which is the tubing that goes into her skull, the only real pain for her is the incision site because you don't have pain receptors in the brain. So
You know what?
without having, yeah, that
I
makes it
didn't
really easy.
I didn't actually know that, but it makes sense when you think about it. But it's like one of those things that I, like, didn't think about before. So interesting.
I've come across a lot of things I would have never thought about until I've had to deal with all this stuff. So yeah,
Crazy.
basically it was just like her incision site, was a little painful. Tylenol covered it, and she was good to go, back to her normal self. The tubing, when that was replaced, because of the tunneling, it affects the muscles and stuff. She didn't really want to turn her head. So that was more of like a week and a half, 2 week recovery. But I mean, the kid's having brain surgery and she's like doing amazing. Like, I could not believe the strength that this kid had, but it's her norm. She
Yeah.
just is like, okay, go with the flow. No big deal.
So I assume she'll have to deal with this for her whole life and essentially like might need additional surgeries as she continues to grow in age.
Yes. Last year in April, she had a seizure and fell and had a seizure. We're not really sure, but she had hit her head on the concrete and it actually disconnected the tubing from the shunt itself. So the parts are like a ventricular catheter that goes into the shunt that's attached to your skull that goes into the brain. And then you have the distal tubing, which is the bottom, that goes from the shunt right at the skull down into her abdomen. When she fell, it disconnected. So they had to go in and just replace that one. They were going to just reconnect it, but unfortunately, when they did a test, they found that her ventricular catheter, the part that goes into the brain, was actually clogged. So they went ahead and replaced it. We're home the next day. She's good. And then in June, she was not feeling good. She was having stomach problems. I mean, about 2 weeks. And finally, it just progressively got worse. Finally, I'm like, okay, it's time to go to the hospital. She had a pseudocyst in her abdomen. And it's a pretty rare complication from having a shunt. But she had a pseudocyst and it caused her to have bacterial meningitis. So they had to pull the entire shunt system out,
Oh
put in
my
an
goodness.
yeah, it was crazy. Put in an external shunt, which meant she could not move without someone coming in and clamping it because when you move up or down, side to side, and you move with the pressure in your head, it changes. So if she stood up or sat back, it dumps fluid. So they have to kind of adjust it. So they clamp it. Like she was only allowed to be unclamped for 30 or to be clamped for 30 minutes because that fluid had to drain somewhere.
That is
So
so wild.
yeah, it was rough, but it really wasn't that bad for her. And I say that, and it was bad because she had bacterial meningitis. She was so sick for 2 weeks she never even ate. But with her sleeping so much, it really wasn't so bad for her during that time. She was on heavy amounts of antibiotics. It was just crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And I had just come off having major back surgery at the end of May. So I'm in there with 40 staples trying to take care of this kid because, that's my job. And the nurses are like, go sit down. But she's also autistic. She's got some behavioral issues. She's got ADHD, OCD, ODD, which I don't know. Most people don't know that term, which is oppositional defiant disorder. So she is very much like, no, I only know my mom. I only want my mom. So I had to pretty much help with everything. So that was pretty rough. But she was cleared enough to go in after they did exploratory abdominal surgery. They drained the cyst. Everything looked good. They went in, weren't sure if they were going to be able to put it back into her abdomen or if they were going to have to redirect it to her heart. But they were able to go back into her abdomen and place it around the liver area. They didn't want to replace it back towards where that pseudocyst was because there's a reoccurrence at that point.
I was gonna say they probably worry about it reoccurring. Interesting. I feel like this is like science class, but in like an interesting way. Um,
It's fun to talk about just because you learn so much. I mean,
as I was gonna say, you
she
clearly have educated yourself, which makes sense because you have to know what's going on with her. So you've clearly educated yourself on all the things that pertain to what is going on with her.
absolutely, doctors are great, but here's the thing, they specialize in certain things and they don't always know everything that's going on. And you really do have to advocate for your kid. We were seeing neurosurgery, neurology, um, ENT, the eye clinic. She's got eye problems due to the pressure in her head. The neonatology when she was younger. We don't see that one anymore. But She's still got this whole list of doctors that we see. And while, yes, they're very educated in their own right, they don't always know everything. So I have to really be up on all that goes on with her so that I can advocate for her needs appropriately.
No, that I mean, that makes sense. And have they ever I know it's probably hard to make this connection, but they have ever made any connections with any of her other diagnoses as related to her brain issues?
Absolutely. Okay, so when she was born, her brain was essentially thinned 35% on one side and 45% on the other. So basically, her brain was about half the size it was supposed to be at birth. There was significant scarring and brain damage due to the fact that her brain could not grow to the size it was supposed to.
And that was due to all the fluid and there was no way to drain it.
Correct.
Got it.
That's why she had to have the surgery right away when she was born. Once she had the surgery, it relieved all that fluid and gave her the space for her brain to grow. So it took her some time to catch up, but she does great. She doesn't hit her milestones quite like she should, but she's not far behind. Part of the reason why I'm so on top of making sure that she gets what she needs, because for her, it's like a speed bump. She wasn't walking till she was 18 months old, but we had her in physical therapy, OT, and she literally went from barely being able to sit up on her own at 12 months, and that was not a constant, to crawling and walking by the time she was 18 months.
That's quite a jump.
Yes, it was
I
huge.
also I also find it fascinating that like her brain still grew outside of the womb even after she was born. I think that's super fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. It's just amazing. Yeah, it compensates for all of the different things that it's had to endure. It's been able to go through and compensate and adjust to what she's had to deal with. And to look at her, you would almost never know that she's got issues. Now that she's getting older and she's 16, you can kind of see there's some delays. But when she was younger, most people couldn't tell that she had had anything wrong, partly because I had kept up on top of the speech, the OT, the PT, making sure that she had those. So she was staying as close to target as possible.
Yeah. Do you worry about her driving?
Absolutely.
I mean, we
uh,
all worry about 16-year-old driving anyway, but I mean, obviously she has added things.
yes. She's not real. She kind of shows interest, but at the same time, she really doesn't. We
Mm,
could go
okay.
get her permit. We're hooked up with as many places as possible. So I'm in Ohio, and we go through Ohioans with disabilities, and then there's another group that's kind of works with them as they get older, um, like age 15 through I believe 18, maybe 21. I know they work with some of the kids after, but it's geared towards your adulthood and transitioning you through that. They do help with like the driving instruction courses, like getting her in there and trying to get her set up to pass the test. She's available to do that, but she doesn't really seem like we could go in and schedule it, but she's just not really seeming to be very adamant about doing it, which I'm okay with. I would rather her be comfortable enough to want to do it. And if she's kind of hesitant, then maybe she's not comfortable enough yet.
Yeah, I guess maybe she just secretly knows that it's not time yet, and that's okay.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what I've told her. You have things going on that are different from other people, and it's okay for you to do things at your pace.
Absolutely.
She has a
So,
sibling younger, only
mhm.
by 18 months. So she has basically been like, Michaela's going to drive me around.
There you go. Count on little sis to take care of you. I like it. But you mentioned that you had back surgery too. So, I mean, my goodness, what is going on with your back?
Yeah, that would be number 5. I had 3 in the course of a year and a month. I had back problems when I was younger, but I was always really active. I might pick something up wrong or do something, end up in the hospital for a minute or two, need muscle relaxers, 3 days of rest, and then I'd be fine. I was a little bit of a daredevil when I was younger. Didn't always do the things that I probably should have. Very rough on my body. I played sports. Between wrecking dirt bikes, jumping off roofs, having accidents that weren't necessarily my fault, but I was in a semi accident at 2 years old. So my back took a quite a toll. And for the most part, I was good until I got pregnant with Kaylee. And she sat right down in my pelvic area.
Of
Like,
course
that's
it did.
just, yes, that's where she's. And at that point, I'm just struggling because, I went from being 125 pounds to 200 pounds. And I got this kid in there, and she's like beating me up, and I'm getting older, and these issues are getting worse. So I have some issues that are just there because, and then I've got issues that I probably created, but they've just progressively gotten worse over time. Most people have heard the term degenerative disc disease. I have that. Spinal stenosis. I'm fused from my L3 to my S1. So I have about 14 screws in my lower back. That was my last surgery. I had my first surgery in 2012, and it was a single level fusion. Did fairly well with that one, but I was continuing to have issues. So I ended up going in like 2019 to have a spinal cord stimulator placed. And that basically what it does is they insert this thing, and it's supposed to be like electric, and it interrupts the pain signals going through the spine so that they're not as bad. They couldn't get the leads up
Interesting.
there. Very interesting technology, although I'm not too happy about people playing with my spinal cord, but
Yeah, no, that's not the area to play with, that's for sure.
no. I had a lot of trouble. They could only get one side in, kept arcing me. It was shocking the crap out of me the whole time they were doing it. They tried for like an hour. Eventually, they were like, "We got to call it. We can't do this."
Oh my
So they wanted,
god.
yeah, it was not fun. They wanted to do what's called a paddle placement, which basically they go in, and instead of inserting leads, they take and remove a small portion of your vertebrae up higher towards your head, place a lead there, and then it's tunneled under your skin where you have a device that's implanted in your lower back under the skin. When I went for that, he asked for an MRI because he wanted to check everything out since they had so many issues going up the spine to begin with. And he's like, you've got a lot of issues in your few discs above where your fusion was because of the instability of that area from being fused. You don't move, there's no movement, and it caused a lot of instability above it. So he sent me in for what was supposed to be just another single level fusion. They were going to remove the hardware to the L5S1, replace that one, but they were going to attach it with rods to L4, L5. When he got in there, he said, "Your L3 vertebrae was just moving around." He's like, "So we went ahead and fused you from L3 to S1." I continued to have a lot of significant problems. I kept telling the doctors I would go in, and they were like, "Nope, everything's fine. Everything's fine." I'm like, "It's not fine." Come to find out, I ended up seeing a doctor about my thoracic spine because I had slipped and fallen when I was pregnant with my youngest. I ended up with a compression fracture at T10 because I have anterior wedging in my thoracic spine, which essentially is like hunchback, but it's lower in my back. Most people do not get compression fractures in that area, but when I did that, it also herniated the disc between
Oof.
T9 and 10. So unfortunately, it ended up being herniated, and the fluid was leaking out, and it essentially was on my spinal cord, and it had started to turn to bone because once the gel stuff substance that's in your disc is exposed and no longer in that sac, over time it will turn to bone. So it was basically cutting my spinal cord off right there. Like, it's a
Oh
wonder
my
I was
god.
paralyzed. But I finally found a doctor that would listen to me. So he's like, "Yeah, we'll do this surgery. We'll go in through your left side. We'll remove one of your ribs for easy access. That way we don't have to cut you open down the middle of your back. Plus, you also have your lungs in the way. So you have a huge increased chance of puncturing a lung. A lot of other problems that could arise from that." So I had that surgery. That one didn't go very well. 3 weeks later, I ended up in the hospital, almost died. And I had my lung was almost completely collapsed because they had nicked a lymphatic duct when they had done it, and it was
Oh no.
yeah, it was leaking lymph fluid into my lung cavity. So it basically was as it was filling up, it was just crushing my lung. So I walk into the hospital and they're like, I don't know how you walked in here, but like you have a very severe infection that if you do not get the proper antibiotics for, you're going to die. And the fact that like I basically was operating on one lung, they're like, we don't know how you just did this, but when you're a single mom, you got two kids, you do what you got to do.
That is crazy. Were you like in pain or struggling to breathe?
I was very, very out of breath, but I knew I had infection because the middle part of my back, where there was the small incision, was swollen. I woke up a Sunday morning. I'm almost 3 weeks post op, and I'm like, I'm feeling pain that I didn't feel prior to. I'm like, okay, something's not right. But I'm also in the middle of waiting for my grandson to be born. She had started laboring, and I'm like, I can't go into the hospital right now. So he was born on Thursday or Wednesday morning. I walked into the hospital Thursday afternoon and they were like, I cannot believe that you waited this long. And I'm like, but I was waiting for grandbaby to come. Like, that was more important. I knew there was infection, but I didn't think it was that bad.
Of
That whole,
course.
I'll be okay. It'll be
Yeah.
fine.
It's fine. Everything's
Yeah,
fine.
everything's fine. They ended up draining 1.5 liters of fluid off of my lung. It was,
Oh my god. That is a lot.
yeah, I mean, think about it, a 2 liter bottle, just a little less than that. It was kind of crazy. So when I had that surgery, they actually had called me the day before I had to have that surgery and was like, oh, hey, by the way, we found something on your x-rays in your lower back. Your screws, the backs of them have come off, and your screws are basically sitting there and they're just wearing away at your vertebrae because they're not attached to the bolts, basically. They're caps, is
What
what
in
they
the
are.
crap?
Yeah, so I kept telling everybody, I'm like, something's wrong in my lower back. My fusion never took. So I had the thoracic surgery in April. And then in September, they went in and took the hardware out of my lower back, but didn't put any hardware back in. I was in so much pain, I literally did not want to wake up. It was horrible. I finally found a surgeon at OSU that would look at me, and he was like, yeah, we don't have any options but surgery. So I had that surgery scheduled for May, and that's when I had the final fusion of my lumbar spine, which hopefully it's the final fusion. I still have some work to do on my thoracic and my neck, but I'm probably looking at two more surgeries, but that's okay.
I was wondering because usually, because I've worked for surgeons before, usually surgeons won't do surgeries that close together because they don't like to put you under anesthesia that often. But it makes sense now why they did because they had to.
Yeah, yeah, it was a matter of time. He had told me, he's like, with those screws being loose like that and it's wearing away at the bone, you could get bone slivers. They could go into your spinal cord. The screws could get lodged into your spinal cord because they were so close to the edge. There was like almost nothing left of my vertebrae for them to hang on to. And then they'd have just been free floating and yeah, it would have been all bad.
Yeah,
I
that would
couldn't.
have been bad. Yeah, I was gonna say that's how you end up paralyzed for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my god.
I like to walk, so I would rather prefer not to have that happen.
Yeah,
This
that's wild.
It's just a really crazy though, because it's like you tell your doctors, like, I know my body, and it's like it was a fight. It's been a fight. I have to say the OSU is a lot better. They've helped me a lot. They seem to listen to me. I'm still in the progress of trying to figure out what's going on with my thoracic spine. And then I found out I've got like two vertebrae in my neck that are slipping back when I look down. And I've got herniated disc there. So it's kind of all bad. But when I look at my daughter and I see how strong she is, it's so hard for me to really complain.
Yeah, I mean, and we've had many guests talk about the importance of advocating for your health because obviously we've talked to people of all sorts of traumas, all sorts of injuries. We've had two people that have been paralyzed, one being my cousin. And I think almost everybody's takeaway, one of the main points is to advocate for your health and to never Never let somebody tell you like, you're fine.
Oh, no, absolutely. If you don't like what you're hearing, go get that second, third, fourth, fifth opinion. It doesn't matter. You're the only one that knows your body. Yes, I understand that these doctors, they have that degree and they know all about the body, but they're not always right. Have many occasions gone in and said something's wrong, and they just treat me like I'm crazy because I don't have their degree. But I'm like, I know my body, and I'm telling you something's not right. And sure enough,
Yeah.
it surfaces.
Yeah, and I mean, and they don't know everything. One of the doctors that I work for, bless him, because he was actually always willing to admit if he didn't know something. He actually did the ankle surgery on my mom when she broke her ankle. And my dad had brought up to him that factor five runs in our family. And for anybody that doesn't know what factor five is, it's a blood clotting disorder. Um, and it runs in my family quite a. My mom is one of seven, and I think out of the seven, at least four of them have it. And my mom hadn't been tested at that point, and she's about to have major surgery. So, of course, my dad was like, hey, would factor five matter about this surgery? And the doctor was like, I have no idea what that is. Let me go do some research and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's crazy though. I mean, it's a good thing that, that was brought up because you just never know. It could be a complication, especially if it's something that isn't so common.
Well, especially when it's related to your blood and you're about to have a surgery and it's on her ankle, which is one of the farthest body parts from your heart. It already has a hard time healing. So you don't want to mess around with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's got to be rough.
Yeah, but luckily she didn't have it, but it was good. We found out. We knew and all good. But I love that he had the ability to be like, I don't know what that is. Let me go get my medical book and find out.
Yeah, that is awesome. There's been a few occasions where I've talked to doctors, concerning my daughter, and they really don't specialize in that. So I typically always take her to children's, but there's been a few occasions where she's had to go to a different hospital just for the mere fact that it was the closest thing and we needed to get her treatment right away, or at least get her stabilized. They don't work with a lot of stuff if you're not familiar with it or you see it enough, and then they treat you like you're kind of stupid. Like, oh yeah, we know what we're talking about, when they really don't. And I refuse to ever take a chance with my daughter. She always
Of
goes to
course.
friends. Like, that's
Of
just where we
course.
go. All her doctors are there. They all know her and her history. It's just the best place for her.
Well, and I'm sure, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm sure something like that probably isn't super common either. So even if you are a doctor and have been a doctor for a long time, that doesn't mean you run into a case like hers.
Right. No, it's not that common. It's more common than you would think, but it's still not that common.
Yeah,
Most of the time, if I take her anywhere and they have the slightest inkling that there could be related to her shunt, they're like, take her to children's. We won't even see her. There was an occasion where I took her out to urgent care. She had an ear infection. I knew it was an ear infection because she's had a lot of issues with her ears. But because of it being on the left side where her shunt is now, that she was having neck pain, and the doctor was kind of hesitant at first to even look at her. She wanted me almost to just take her over there, and she was like, "Oh gosh, no." She's like, "Yeah, it's definitely an ear infection." When she looked in there, she's like, "That," and I can never say it, the Eustachian tube or whatever was inflamed so badly because of her infection, which would be why her neck was hurting. But most of the time they hear that and they're like, "Nope, we don't want to see her. Go to children's," which is fine. I don't mind that, but like, I knew it was an
yeah.
infection at that point.
Yeah, they probably worry about liability because heaven forbid if something did happen and if they didn't know, like that could get ugly really quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um so obviously y'all have seen that Buffy's already super interesting, but her story to we're 30 minutes in and the story continues. um so I know I obviously as somebody who knows you, I know a little bit about your husband. Was this happening like while all these surgeries were happening? Like were you dealing with all that at the same time or did this at least happen like before or after? Like obviously Kaylee was probably mixed in there because she was so little, but
Yeah, with my ex-husband going to prison.
Yeah.
Yeah. The girls were 7 and 8 when he was arrested. So we split in 2015. He was officially arrested January 4th of 2017 under the charges of production of child pornography, in which
So
my
that
children.
was so that was before. No, you said you had your first surgery in 2012?
Yes, I
I
had
got the
had.
year right.
I had one back surgery prior to his arrest, and then four after. And she had had, oh gosh, like I said, you lose count of them after there's been so many. She's had four surgeries since he's been in prison, but she had several prior to him being
Okay.
arrested.
And I kinda cut you off, so I apologize about that, but did you
Oh,
say it did not include your children, I'm assuming?
no, it did include
Okay.
my children. Silver
Oh, it
lining though, which
did.
you,
Okay.
yes, you always have to try to find the good in everything because there's always something good, even if it's really hard to find. They were not touched or posed that we're aware of. So, as far as we know through the investigation and everything that they found, he basically took pictures of them getting in and out of the tub, getting dressed. But the problem was they were prepubescent, which made the charge harsher. And he focused in on their genitalia, which obviously makes it a pornography sex crime.
Obviously.
So he was actually trading with an undercover officer. Now, the story gets even more interesting because he actually comes from a line of cops.
Oh.
His dad
Oh, I
was a
didn't know that.
Yes, his dad was a detective for the Columbus CPD. Grandfather was a detective, retired motorcycle cop. Uncle was deputy sheriff at the Jackson Pike facility. So, with that being said, yeah, generational cops, and he ends up in prison for child pornography. I don't know what happened to him in his childhood. I can only speculate, but never in my wildest dreams would I have ever imagined it. We had issues. He was perverse as an adult, but I was never given any sort of indication that he had any sort of interest in children. So when
Yeah.
I got that call, like I was blown. Well, they didn't actually tell me when they called me. They just said, "This is Children's Services. We need you to come pick your children up right away. You'll be briefed by the FBI when you get here." I'm like, "What the heck?"
Talk about having a panic attack on the way to the school, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Um, Also kind of an odd question for you, but, like, when she was having all those surgeries and stuff, was, like, he supportive? Like, was he a good dad, like, on the outside of things, I guess?
No, I always took care of everything. I'm the one that did all the
Okay.
hospital stays. He didn't know her medical history. He always said, "Well, you know everything. You deal with it," basically.
Okay,
So,
interesting.
yeah, he just wanted to do his own thing, which was fine because, like I said, we had had some issues in our marriage. And the only reason that we actually stayed together for as long as we did was just for the mere fact that Kaylee had so many issues and I needed to be at home with her. We were married for 9 years in total. A year and a half of that, I was trying to get divorced, but we were together 2 years prior. Kaylee was born when we about hit our 2 year mark. And then we got married right before she was born because she was going to be in another hospital. So he couldn't sign for anything. So if anything happened, there was nothing that he could sign for. So we actually just got married, just got the certificate and stuff 2 weeks before she was born. But then we were together in total of 9 years, but like I said, it took a year and a half for me to track him down. He wouldn't give me his address. I had to get slick to
Oh
get him.
my gosh.
Yeah, I had to
Of
go.
course.
Yeah, yeah, it was kind of crazy. It was like, "You're with another woman. I don't want to be with you. Like, you're having a baby with someone else. Like, just let me have my divorce. I don't.
Yeah, I don't wanna be associated with you. Looking back now, are there anything that you felt like you missed that were, like, red flags, or is it still just completely, like, a mind F to you?
I would love to. I have looked back. I can't tell you how many times. Like I had to have missed something, or was I just overlooking things? Was I being stupid? Did I just not want to see? I can't see anything whatsoever that would indicate that he would have that desire for children. Like I said, we had some issues in our adult relationship. He did the same thing to me. He took pictures of me getting in and out of the shower, getting dressed, pictures that I had no clue about, and was trading them with people. It was part of the reason why we had such a rocky marriage, because I had found out he was trying to solicit me out on the internet. So yeah, he was
Usually
all
makes
about.
sense.
There was definitely issues there, but like I said, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought children, let alone his own. I mean, that just
Yeah.
blows my mind. I still can't fathom it. But
Yeah.
he
It
did get
seems
17 years.
like he got how many years? I'm sorry.
17 years.
That's not long enough.
No, not.
Um, well, and they always say that those are one of the people that, you know, have a harder time in prison, we'll say the least.
Yeah, well,
Um,
he's in federal, so it's actually kind of cushy for him, unfortunately, because he gets to be with all the other ones, sadly.
oh, yeah, that's kind of sad. But I can't really say that I'm super surprised, I guess, that he was so slick. Um, it's nothing that I've experienced firsthand, but there was a guy in Kyle's unit at one point that got arrested for this same thing, for solicitation of child pornography. And I had met him obviously because he had gone like on deployments with my husband. I was friends with his wife. Like it blew everybody's mind. Like we were like, I'm
Oh,
sorry. Did you just say child pornography?
oh no, absolutely. Like I was dumbstruck. Like I could not even understand it. Like it took me a few days just to figure out what was going on. Like I'm like, I don't get this. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. Like you're just completely blindsided. I mean, it affected everyone. Like he has no clue how it affected his entire family. And then his dad, about a month after he was sentenced, had a massive heart attack. And I can guarantee you he was part of the reason.
Oh yeah, it broke his heart.
Oh, the disgrace. Absolutely. He was living at his house when the FBI raided his house. Can you
Oh my
imagine
god.
being a detective for,
No.
police department, and the FBI is showing up wanting to raid your house? I'm like, couldn't even imagine the disgrace that he felt.
Oh, I can't either. And your girls, how have your girls coped with it?
For the longest time, I was able, because they were not subjected to being touched or posed or anything like that. So there was nothing that we really had to deal with concerning the sexual side of it. It was more grief loss for them. So I had them in counseling. I went through the whole thing. Like they were examined, they were, questioned. They went to several different like meetings with people to talk to them to see if they were able to get anything from them without asking them directly, like, hey, has this happened? They have a way with kids, but that way, if there's something that occurred, they have a way of getting it out without exposing them to something that they may not know about. But it was really just grief loss for the first few years. My oldest daughter, she knows, but she doesn't really want to acknowledge it, because I think if she acknowledges it, then she has to admit he's not a good guy. So it's just hard. My youngest, sorry, my youngest asked me when she was 10, she says, Mommy, why is dad in prison? Like, I want to know why. I've always been able, kids ask you questions, and you're able to answer questions without actually telling them anything, because they really don't want the answer most of the time, and they don't really care for the details. So I was always able to kind of just divert. I'm like, when how little kids get in trouble, you go stand in the corner or whatever. When adults get in trouble, they go to jail, or if it's bad prisons, like, the difference of you maybe, coloring on the wall versus punching your sister, the difference in trying to explain how there's difference in crime, essentially. But how do you tell little kids that stuff?
Especially when it involves them.
Right. But they didn't know that there was involvement. like I said, Kaylee stumbled across it because I found her actually searching stuff, and there's actually information that's pretty detailed that you can actually just pull up online.
Ugh,
So
gotta love and hate
yeah,
online.
yeah. So like I said, she knows, but she doesn't want to acknowledge it, which I don't try to tell her otherwise, just because she's got to process it her own way.
Yeah, she'll have her moment whenever that may be.
Yeah, and I've had him in therapy ever since. So,
I
but
mean, we can bless one thing that he did not touch them. So
right.
there's that. I mean, not to take away from what actually did happen, but thank Lord Jesus that he didn't actually touch him.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. That's what I said. You got to find the good in everything, because there is always something good, even in the worst situation. But my youngest, that was hard, because she just said, "Mom, I tried to get away from it. Like, I tried to go around it, and she wasn't having it, and she's always been too smart for her own good."
I
But
was gonna say too smart for her. That's exactly what I was
yeah.
gonna say. Too smart for her own good.
Oh yeah, 4 years old. She's like, "Mom, I know Santa Claus isn't real. Can I just help you wrap Kaylee's presents?" Like, how do
Oh
you
my
know
goodness.
that? She goes, "Ah, I'm not dumb, Mom."
Oh my gosh. Bless her.
So, I told her, I was like, your dad was arrested because he took pictures of you and your sister that were just not appropriate. And she's 10 at this point. She already knows what sex is because she asked me blatantly. I avoided that conversation for a couple years. And finally, she's like, "No, Mom, I want to know exactly how the baby gets in the mom." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. All right, this is how it works." Had that conversation. So she was aware at that point. And I mean, the terms, clearly they are identified obviously with sexual behavior. So, she knew. And I basically told her that, your dad took pictures of you um, when you were not dressed. And it's a very, very serious thing. And so she just looked at me and she just said, "I know he's a bad guy, but I love him." And I'm like, "It's your dad. How can you not, But I mean, she hates him now. She just hates him, and I hate that he's done this to them, because he has no clue what he's wrong. I have to be the one to pick up the pieces, and you know, and still struggle with all of it behind closed doors, because I didn't have anybody, really. Like, I had my mom a little bit, but when I went to go do the victim impact statement and stand next to him while his attorney is basically saying, "Oh, he did it because he was drunk," I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" But I wanted to ensure that the judge knew the impact that it had on our lives, so that he got the max minimum, which was 17 years, which is still not long enough. But
No, that's not long enough. I agree with you, but good for you for
yeah,
having the strength to stand beside him. Um,
it
that
was
had to
hard.
be I was gonna say that had to probably be one of the hardest moments of your life, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Um, because I mean, he took something from you on so many levels as a mom, as a wife, as a woman.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, I struggled because I felt for a while like, you missed something. You didn't protect them. I blame myself for a long time. I
I'm
know
sure
that's
you
not
did.
true now,
Hmm.
but when you're a parent, that's your job. You're supposed to protect your kids. And when somebody does something, even though it's really not in your hands, logically you think like that. Okay, I couldn't have done anything, but I still felt like it was my fault because I didn't protect them. And this isn't just something that, oh, okay, he's in jail, all is said and done, it's good. No, this is something that they have to deal with every single day. I've had my youngest daughter before. We've been leaving the school, and she's like, "Man, I just wish I had a dad. I see these kids that come out here and they get in the car and their mommy and their daddy's there. And I love you, and I have you, but I don't have a family." That's how she views it. And
Right. Yeah.
you know, and she's young, so I understand. Like all I see is like he's a bad person, so I don't want him near but they just remember him as the dad that loved them.
Well, that
Which
shows you the innocence of children because they truly are. Um, and of course, it's not your. I mean, who would ever think? I mean, it's like the spouses that murder each other. I'm sure none of those people thought when they were standing at that altar that in X amount of years, that same person would murder them. Just like you didn't stand there thinking that he was going to manipulate your children.
oh no, not at all. Like I said, I looked back so many times trying to figure it out. Like I said, he did the same thing to me by taking pictures of me and violating my privacy. But I never would have thought a child, let alone his own.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more shocking when it's his own because you would think he would at least have a different perspective of his
Right.
own children because he created them. But it just shows you how whatever is in his brain is messed up.
Oh, absolutely. I'm absolutely 100% convinced that something happened to him as a child. 80% of, and the statistics may have changed at this point, but 80% of people who do things like this have been abused themselves. So I don't know what happened. He's never talked about it. I do know that the girlfriend at the time was in on it because her two daughters as well were in the photographs. I had to identify not only my kids, but her kids too.
Oh my goodness.
He actually did say that she was involved and then he recanted and then they couldn't get her on anything. So she's walking the streets. But
Lovely.
yeah, with her two daughters that if you would let someone do that to your kids, you don't
Hmm.
deserve to have them. I
No,
just
absolutely not.
hope and pray that those two girls end up being okay.
I hope so too. I hope they are okay. And I mean, this all goes back to my psychology, but I would love to like study his brain. I wonder, like, not only if it was like trauma induced or if like there's a chromosome missing or a connection missing. I don't know. Like, it just makes you wonder.
Right. Oh no, absolutely. I I would love to know why.
Hmm.
And I don't know that it's not that that's going to give me any sort of justification because that's not what it is, but I guess I guess it's just like if I could understand that something happened to him, I could and it's not that I would understand what he did because I can't ever understand that, but it would just make more sense, I guess. You search for answers and closure on things that you'll never get answer and closures for.
Yeah, I think it's only natural for us that we want to have answers and to understand. That's just how we are as humans. But I mean, even when you think about it, some of the biggest serial killers, like Bundy, he came from a great family. He had no excuse to be how he was, where other ones did have a crappy upbringing, but
Oh,
there's
absolutely.
no there's no just one straight line to why people are the way they are.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, you look at him. Uh his family, his mom is a registered nurse, works for a surgical center. His dad's a detective. They were married clear up until, well, I mean, they divorced, but it was well after he was of age. So he grew up in a solid household. You on the outside looking in, they made over six figures. They lived in a gorgeous house, had the best of everything. They were included as swimming, dancing, all of the stuff. Well, he didn't do dance, but like his sisters did. Like they had the privileges to do all of the things that any kid would want to do. So to see that he came from a household and a lifestyle like that to run down that path is just, like I said, there's no justification for it, but I guess it's easier to accept that he did something like this had something been done to him, I guess, versus
Yeah.
nothing was ever done to him and he just chose to do this.
Yeah,
So,
again, I think that's why a lot of people struggled with Bundy. He was so intelligent and came from such a good family and was handsome and all these things that he just seemed so normal. It was hard to grasp that he was such a psychopath. So
oh,
it's a
absolutely.
very similar thing that this person you created a family with that
Uh,
you thought came from a great family. I don't know, maybe you can like ask his sisters. I don't know. Somebody.
I've explored the issue as far as I could probably get through. I wholeheartedly do believe that his mother knows something. He had a hatred for her. I mean, an absolute hatred for her. You
Mm,
could see it in
okay.
his eyes. The only time he really had anything to do with her is when he wanted something. But there was something there, and I just find it awful funny now that she thinks it's okay. She visits him, makes sure he has money on his commissary, like is constantly talking about him like he's done nothing wrong. Like she literally acts like he's done nothing wrong. Blames the girlfriend. It was all Natalie's fault, yet he admitted to it. Like literally admitted to it. How can you say that that was okay ever? And I think right now she is feeling guilty for whatever it was that I don't think she necessarily did anything to him, but I think she knew something. I am guessing that he went to her saying, "Hey, something's going on," and she either
Dismissed it.
dismissed it or let it go on and didn't do anything about it.
I've actually thought about that too as a mom, like how I would feel if my child ended up being something in the future. Um, and I think that is hard. She's probably partially in denial, or maybe there is something wrong with her, but it's hard as a mom. Like even now, like it's hard for you to think about him being in that way. And I think I'd struggle if my kid ended up in jail for something crazy too, like admitting like I raised this person, they ended up being a horrible person. Like I
Oh,
wonder
yeah.
if I wonder if she's maybe even just like holding on to the old idea of him, or maybe if she visits him, it'll make him better. I mean, there's so many theories you could run with on that.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, there's quite a few issues with her in general. She's a narcissist, but um, yeah, I think a lot of it is guilt. I think a lot of it is denial. I think a lot of it's shame too.
Hmm.
Like she failed him because, like I said, wholeheartedly, I believe she knew something and just never acted on it, and then just thought that everything would be okay. And because heaven forbid we disgrace the family by exposing something. You know what I mean?
Well, we're gonna have to turn the how to deal when the shit gets real podcast into investigative podcast and see what we can figure out.
I'm down. Let's do it.
um, Buffy, what do you want to leave our listeners with, whether it be advice or just anything that you think is important in any of regards, whether it's
Oh,
surgeries, dealing with your husband, anything, just whatever rings truest to you that you want to leave people with that you think is important.
oh, I could go on and on, but I'll just go with this. Always advocate for yourself. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you're wrong. Get that second, third, fourth, fifth opinion if need be. Advocate for your children. You know your kids better than anybody else. And when it comes to, situations such as like my ex-husband, that situation, listen to your kids, believe your kids. Don't ever make them feel like they can't talk to you. Because if they feel like they can't talk to you or you just brush them off, you could be doing a lot more harm than good, especially later on, because that stuff doesn't just go away, it sticks with you. So just listen to your kids, believe them until you have evidence otherwise, I guess. But and then just watch the people that your kids are around. I mean, I know that's hard to say because, like you said, so often these situations happen, and you are like, I'd have never guessed, completely mind blown. But
Some of these people are so slick, and then it's funny, some of them are terrible at it.
oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I think they get to a point where they've been so good at it that then they start slipping up because they think they're invincible. But you know.
That is true. That is true. I guess that leads me to one final question, even though I said we were wrapping it up. Do you worry about when he gets out?
Oh, 100%. Right now, there's currently a no contact order. He can't even have any sort of access to the girls whatsoever unless he goes through the courts, and the judge will deny it immediately. There was also a no contact order through the FBI, but the unfortunate thing is the girls will be 23 and 24 when he gets out. And I don't have to worry about my youngest. She wants absolutely nothing to do with him. But my oldest daughter, she's got medical problems and she's kind of living in this fantasy world. And, if I have to take over some sort of guardianship when she's 18 to make sure that she is safe, I will do so. She has talked about, oh, I can't wait till dad gets out. Then I'm going to go live with him and I'll live with you part time. And I'm like,
Woo, that's gotta scare the shit out of you.
it absolutely does. But I also, I take into account like her situation. So
Yeah.
we're not there. I don't
Well,
have to worry about it right now, but it's
well,
definitely been,
and bless her sweetheart, still trying to see the good in him. Like, kids are so good. But yeah, whoo, talk about scaring the crap out of you.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it wasn't a one and done. This is going to affect us for the rest of our lives. And that's definitely a huge concern.
The question is too, is he even gonna care about the no contact orders? He gonna be one of those dudes that are like, this is just a piece of paper and doesn't mean shit.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, I actually don't know how that no contact order works once they're 18. I don't know if that would still apply. I
Hmm.
definitely need to check into that. But
All right,
uh,
internet sleuths, if you know, let us know if
yes,
how no
absolutely.
contact orders work once you're over 18.
Yes, definitely. I would love to know that information. But,
We're planning for the future. We've got time, but we're planning for the
yeah,
future.
his release date is not until 2031. So,
All right, we got plenty of time. Good deal.
yeah, but
Um,
over my dead body. Like,
yep,
what it comes down to. He won't have a second chance to hurt my kids.
absolutely, absolutely not. And I'm sure there will be plenty of people in your corner that will, if he does manage to slice you down, which I highly doubt would happen, that they would step up and
Oh,
take the next
100%.
round.
Yep, 100%.
Well, Buffy, thank you so much for your candidness and your rawness.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is why I love what I do because I meet amazing, incredible, strong, determined, beautiful people like yourself.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's only fair since I have an incredibly strong, beautiful podcaster that's wanting to interview me and know my story. So
All
I
right, before we cry again, this is how to deal when the shit gets real, guys, and we'll see y'all next episode.